place to leave it. Thank you for that. You picked two passages that are so different from one another.
Yeah.
And it's quite interesting, and I think it, in some ways, it kind of sums up the way the book works. That, you know, one is poetic and almost deeply introspective.
Yes.
And another is quite ironic and sort of light-hearted, sort of the view of a wise observer looking back with a bit of wry humour.
Yes. Well, I read quite a few books on mental illness and on all sorts of things in nursing, and I found that if I read something that was totally the personal journey, that was all built on introspection, then I found it very hard to take something away that I could apply to either my patients or my own life. So right from the very beginning, it was a book that I was going to look out. The very reason I wrote it, because I couldn't find a book that would hit home for me, so I decided to write the book I wish I'd read.
That you had as your own.
That I wish I could have picked up, and I would sit there thinking, I wish someone else had done this.
Yes, because it's not at all, aside from the chapters by Tony Attwood, it's not a guide.
No.
It's more like a good friend who's been through what you've been through, isn't it? And is that's the way you meant it, as a sort of, well, I've been there, you can get through this, you know, this is what happened.
Yes.
And let's laugh together, because we know, you know.
Yes, because, you know, there will be funny bits, there will be joyful bits, there will be the tough times when you fold in half and say, I can't do this, and there seems no answer at all. And you can't predict the future. When with so many children you have a little bit of an idea, you can imagine them here or there. But with an Asperger's child, you feel like there's a barrier to where you're going to see that they will be.
And did you have, you know, throughout your son's young life, you know, this sense of, I'll always be the comfort zone, you know, he'll never be able to leave this comfort zone point, and therefore I'll never have my own space. I'll never be able to find my own zone.
No, exactly, because when I went up to the school, and I think one thing that anyone, well, I think all parents would know, that when you're with a child and they're misbehaving or they're doing anything at all, no one looks at the child. They instantly look at the parent and think, what's wrong with the parent? No one ever sort of thinks the child is struggling or in difficulty. And when I went to the school and, you know, they sat down, they said, we'd like to extend your son. And I said, what on earth do you think I want to do? Because it's my walking frame he will be holding on to if I get this wrong. It's my job to make my son independent, not dependent, because that's not love, that's selfishness. So I have to give him skills, and I think the thing that hits you with an Asperger's child is that you have to push them away. Whereas the other one is going to throw the shoe at you and say, I do it myself. Your Asperger child will still be chasing you around saying, why aren't you doing it?
Yes. So tell me at what stage or what point you thought, okay, you know, I've got all these, you know, I've got all these thoughts, I've got all these ideas, I can do something that people will help. And how did you get from that point where you know, you had something to say to actually pulling it together into a proper book form?
Well, the book, as you said, has the feel of being distinct chapters or distinct episodes that stand alone to a degree, and I had written it that way. I thought food obsessions or this situation or that. The first chapter I wrote was the letter to Centrelink, and it wasn't a book then.
And was that the real letter you wrote to Centrelink?
That is the real letter I wrote.
Did you post that off?
I handed it to them. And I thought,
they don't handle humour all that well in my experience.
No, well, I never heard anything about it, and they didn't require it at all. Whereas when he was 3, I had to write a great screed on why a child with ADD needed more time. And as I was reading through the list that they give you, is he tube fed? You know, does he wear nappies? Does he do all these things? I thought, what's wrong with me? What, you know, I don't have to do all those things. And I thought, and yet I'm busier with him than I am with the 40 dementia patients I go to look after. And so I started out, and only the first sentence was really the serious minded, and then it was 3 o'clock in the morning and I went straight to Irish and the humour, but it was the truth. It was that he had the verbal skills of a barrister and the language of a wharfie. You know, that was in essence who my son was, and it was only later on that I thought, I think I can pull this together, because my nursing background will help me to make observations that are objective enough, to balance out, so that and to know the legal parameters, so that I wouldn't step into making opinion and judgment on what I was seeing.
And did you find that balance between introspection and sort of reflection was also what you went through as a parent? You know, that you go through periods of intense pain and then sort of wry amusement at yourself and at your son.
Oh, exactly. And my whole feeling about the book was that I was going to have a conversation with the page. It was going to just be real. It was just going to be flowing out of me. Mind you, I had a mentor who I had to pay a significant amount of money that was absolutely worth every cent to structure it.
Tell me a bit about that process. At what point did you decide, presumably you made this hard decision, that you needed a third person in another person to actually work with you to structure this book?
Yes, well, I felt quite lost, because it was different than fiction, and I hadn't tackled fiction because I'm not, I wasn't originally a writer, although I'd always done some poetry and a lot of those bits and pieces. I got up to 43,000 words, and I had subjects, I had separate subjects, and I thought it'd be better to get advice earlier than later. And so I handpicked someone. I rang a few people and I said, are you interested in this? Is this the type of book you'd like to work on? So that I didn't get someone who was into vampires or science fiction, but someone who it would resonate with. And the woman I found was Antoinette Eklund, and she had a gifted child and a child with a disability. So she was perfect, because when I went through school, I was a gifted child, and I had that set of problems to deal with. And
Asperger's children often have gifted elements, as indeed your son has with guitar.
Yes. Well, I can remember even when I was at school that I thought, the gifted ones are on the weird spectrum, and the weird ones are on the gifted spectrum, and there's because it seemed that way.
Also, do you feel that, and certainly it's been my experience, that there is, at high gifted levels, there is always an Asperger's element. There's always an element of the ability to hone in obsessively on something.
Oh, definitely. Absolutely, definitely. Because when we went along to the first seminar, and I'd only heard about the diagnosis, I thought you either have it or you don't, like diabetes, because I knew next to nothing. And Professor Attwood stood up the front and said, now I'm going to talk about all sorts of characteristics, and as I go, every one of you is going to chuckle or have a moment where you think, oh, and I thought, oh yeah, right. No, not me, because, that's not going to happen. And then, he got about 2/3 of the way through. I'm feeling really smug, thinking, no, because there were a few titters and a bit of this and a bit of that. And he said, have any of you done the complicated maths problems, got the answer, and not known how you got it, not known the working out? And I thought, oh God. Oh yeah, I remember that. And I never could do the working out in any other way than to get the answer, which came from I don't know where, and then I had to work back towards, because I was obsessive enough that I wanted the full marks.